Welcome to my channel! Today, I want to share something special with you. This is not just another manga recap. This is my own original screenplay adaptation, personally written and handcrafted based on one of the most gripping webtoons I've ever read. I've created a custom interpretation of this story, bringing my creative vision and unique perspective to every scene. What you're about to watch is my personal take on this incredible narrative. This is original fan-made content, completely rewritten with my own creative direction. So if you love dark romance, psychological thrillers, and original manga adaptations, this video is for you. Let's dive in.
Rain lashed against the police station windows, but the real chill wasn't outside. It was in. A woman named Yeonu had come to file a report, but instead of help, she hit a wall of indifference. The officer tiredly reviewed her statement. He advised her not to make a scene, reminding her it was a police station, not a theater. Doubt was written all over his face. He suggested that Mr. Cha Yun Seok had probably just been a bit more persistent than usual in showing his feelings. The report detailed everything, how she worked as his secretary, how the gaslighting and threats began. But to the officer, they were just words on paper. He suggested she simply talk to her boss, remarking that he didn't seem like someone impossible to reason with. Yeonu realized she wouldn't find any help here. She walked out of the station into the same cold rain, opening her umbrella. Her hope for protection had crumbled, leaving only emptiness and fear. Suddenly, a bright red car pulled up beside her. The door swung open, and a dark silhouette emerged, the very person she was trying to escape. Yeonu's heart skipped a beat. It was him, Cha Yun Seok. Terror seized her, her face frozen in a mask of panic. Her first thought was to run, immediately, without looking back. He appeared behind her like a ghost. His hot breath touched her ear, and a predatory whisper cut through the sound of the rain. He asked where she thought she was going. Yun Seok leaned in closer, his face inches from hers. He told her his lawyers had been pushing for a countersuit, but he'd held them back, purely for her own good. With a chilling smile, he uttered words more terrifying than any threat. He would only let her go when she was dead. There was nothing but obsession in his eyes. He ordered her to remember, as long as she was alive, there would only be one man in her life, Cha Yun Seok. He stepped back, heading for his car. As a parting shot, he casually mentioned he'd mark her absence yesterday and today as paid leave. Turning back, he gave her that same predatory smile and ordered her to be at the office tomorrow. His gaze promised he wouldn't give up. Yeonu pulled out her phone. The voice recorder app flashed a low battery warning. She had recorded the entire conversation. Now she had to disappear. Standing in the rain, broken and terrified, she made the only decision she could. She needed to find a place where he would never find her. She turned and walked away, melting into the crowd of other people with umbrellas. Her silhouette reflected in the wet puddles of the night city. Without wasting a moment, she packed the bare essentials at home and bought a ticket for the earliest morning bus. It was a one-way ticket, far away from this nightmare. Already on the bus, she watched the lights of the city rush by. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Vice President Cha Yun Seok. He wrote that finding her would be no trouble at all and advised her to report to the office immediately. The threat was direct and unambiguous. Yeonu's hands trembled. Without hesitation, she swiped her finger across the screen, powering down the phone. She was cutting the last thread that connected her to him. The bus sped across a bridge, carrying her away. She knew she couldn't break free from his grasp. The only way out was to run. To disappear. It was the only way to save herself. The bus drove further and further, becoming a small red dot in the darkness. At the same time, in a luxury car, a man in a suit reached out his hand, catching the last few drops of rain. He noted with relief that the spring downpour was finally letting up. This man was Nam Tae-jin, the president of Soryang Construction. He had been worried the heavy rain might disrupt an important event. He turned to his companion, a young man who was silently studying some documents. The young man looked up. His name was Ham Seon Hoon, and he was the executive director of Soryang Construction. He calmly agreed that everything had worked out. The documents he held contained a report on the start of a new construction project. It all began when thermal springs were discovered in Moksan County. Upon learning this, Soryang Construction had moved swiftly. The company bought up all the land in the county to build a massive resort complex with spas, parks, and golf clubs. It was a grand development plan, ambitious and incredibly profitable. And this entire project, from start to finish, was led by him, Executive Director Ham Seon Hoon. Thanks to this success, Soryang Construction finally shed its reputation as the eternal runner-up in the construction industry. President Nam laughed heartily, imagining the faces of their competitors from Unam. He'd heard they were calling Seon Hoon a villain for snatching all the contracts from under their noses. Seon Hoon merely commented that it was absurd. He was a man of action, not empty talk. This only amused the president more, and he burst into laughter again. Seon Hoon mentally wished he had driven his own car. His boisterous uncle was exhausting. The president asked how long Seon Hoon planned to stay in Moksan. He replied, about a month. Seon Hoon assured his uncle there was no need to worry about the director's absence from headquarters as long as the president himself was there. The president grumbled that Seon Hoon relied on him too much, claiming he didn't understand any of his nephew's business. But Seon Hoon was calm. He planned to juggle his work there with his office duties, as the initial foundation phase was critically important. Tired of the conversation, the president decided to get out of the car early to take a nap. He was worn out from the past few days and arranged to meet his nephew later at a place called Domenje. Skip, redundant emotion. The driver helped the president switch to another car, and the motorcade moved on. Seon Hoon remained alone in the car, engrossed in his work on a tablet. Suddenly, the car screeched to a halt. On the roadside at a bus stop stood a lone, drenched figure. It was Yeonu. The driver gripped the steering wheel, his face pale with fright. He turned to his boss, anxiously asking if he was all right. Seon Hoon, lost in his thoughts, calmly inquired about what had happened. The driver reported that the president's car had braked sharply and seemed to have splashed a girl. Through the fog and drizzle, it was hard to make out details, but the silhouette of a girl with a suitcase was clearly visible. The driver jumped out of the car and began scolding Yeonu for standing too close to the road. Yeonu stood silently, her head bowed. She had thought her bus was arriving, and now her clothes were soaked and muddy. The driver, relentless, pulled out his wallet. He shouted that there was a very important person in the car and shoved money at her for dry cleaning. At that moment, Seon Hoon himself stepped out of the car. His stern gaze took in the scene. He noted to himself that the girl didn't look like a local. He wondered if she was leaving or had just arrived. The driver continued to yell that they didn't have time. His rudeness was excessive. Yeonu flinched at his shouting. Her face was a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Stammering, she muttered that it was fine, and they should just go, unless they were planning to extort more money. She thought that just 6 months ago, she would have reacted differently. But now, just hearing that domineering tone made her throat tighten. "Driver, that's enough." A calm but authoritative voice cut in. It was Seon Hoon. Yeonu looked up and saw him. Her eyes were wide with surprise and confusion. Seon Hoon approached, his imposing figure exuding a sense of reliability. He calmly asked if she was having any problems. The driver immediately began apologizing to the director, explaining that he'd offered to pay for dry cleaning, but the girl had refused. Yeonu stood with her hands clasped awkwardly, her clothes hopelessly stained. Seon Hoon, addressing her, said that his employee, being new to the area, had made a mistake. He apologized for the trouble. Yeonu mumbled that it was all right, that she had been careless, and they had nothing to apologize for. Seon Hoon took out his business card and a pen. He explained that there were no Soryang department stores in Moksan, but they were easy to find in other regions. He handed her the card, adding that he couldn't know the value of her clothes and would be grateful if she chose a suitable form of compensation herself. Yeonu took the business card. Behind her, the driver was in shock. He knew that having Mr. Ham's card was like having an unlimited credit card for Soryang's services. Just then, her bus arrived, interrupting the awkward scene. After the girl left, the driver began to grovel before Seon Heon, apologizing for the trouble he'd caused. Seon Heon coldly adjusted the Soryang pin on the driver's lapel. He sarcastically remarked that he had provided excellent publicity for the company. The driver turned pale, stammering apologies. He tried to justify himself, saying it was a way of warding off bad luck before an important event. Seon Heon took the car keys from him, ordering him to return them once he reached Domenje on foot. The driver bowed obediently as Seon Heon walked away without a backward glance. Muttering to himself, he said that he didn't need any scandals right now. Deep down, however, he understood that she was unlikely to cause a scene, while the driver had acted unfairly. Arriving at her family home, Yeonu changed into comfortable clothes, feeling a little calmer. She had called her mom's landline, but she had already left. It turned out some important people from Seoul had arrived in their town. Yeonu was disappointed. She had only wanted to see her mom and leave immediately, but she hadn't wanted to worry her by calling ahead. Suddenly, she remembered the word the driver had said, Domenje. It sounded familiar. She looked at the business card in her hand, and then she remembered, Domenje belonged to Soryang Construction. It hit her. Everyone who grew up in Moksan had heard the name at least once, Ham Seon Hoon. The important person from Seoul her mom had mentioned. It was him. She realized her mom would be staying in a dorm for work, and they wouldn't see each other. Now she had absolutely nowhere to go. Despair washed over her. She sank to the floor, hugging her knees. The fear that Cha Yun Seok would find her soon returned with a vengeance. A sudden, panicked thought pierced her mind. Had Cha Yun Seok already tracked her down? How did it all come to this? To understand her fear, we have to go back in time. Not long ago, she worked at Namsol, a company with revenues exceeding 25 billion won. One day, a new vice president, Cha Yun Seok, appeared in their office. At first glance, he seemed charming and friendly. Yeonu politely greeted him, just like all the other employees. He smiled and said he hoped they would get along. Nothing seemed amiss. Rumors immediately started swirling in the office. Yun Seok was the president's son. That explained a lot. Shortly after, one of the managers called Yeonu over. She turned around, wondering with confusion why she was needed. A colleague delivered the stunning news. She was being appointed as the new vice president's personal secretary. From now on, her desk would be in his reception area. Yeonu was bewildered. She had just gotten used to her duties. Standing at his office door, she couldn't understand the reason for such a sudden transfer. The door opened and Yun Seok stood there. With a predatory smile, he said he was counting on her. At that moment, Yeonu had no idea what a nightmare her life was about to become. He didn't care about the company's affairs. He led an idle life, destroying everything in his path. Yun Seok fraternized with gangsters, calling them his brothers, and wasted his nights in clubs. And at some point, all his unhealthy obsession shifted onto her. He stalked her, called her at night, screaming into the phone, demanding to know why she wasn't picking up, and ordering her to let him in. He would pound on her door, driven mad with rage, demanding she open it immediately. For Yeonu, it became a living hell, one she was desperately trying to escape. Back in the present, in her mother's empty house, an old telephone rang. Yeonu jumped, but tried to calm herself. With a trembling hand, she picked up the receiver. A frantic woman's voice came from the other end. It was her aunt, Cha Young. Yeonu confirmed it was her. Her aunt screamed into the phone that there had been a terrible accident. Her mother was hurt. Yeonu's world turned upside down. The only thing she could breathe out was, "What?" Not thinking, she bolted from the house and rushed to the hospital, screaming for her mom. In the hospital room, she was greeted by her smiling mother with an arm in a cast. She joked about why Yeonu was rushing as if wolves were chasing her. Yeonu ran to the bed, breathing a sigh of relief. Her mom reassured her, saying she got off easy, though she'd thought her time had come. It turned out she had just been daydreaming and missed a step on the stairs. Her mother asked what brought Yeonu home. She lied, saying she was on vacation. She apologized for not giving a heads up, claiming it all happened too suddenly. Her mom tried to get up, saying she couldn't just lie around, but Yeonu stopped her. The doctor had ordered complete rest for several months, but her mother was in a panic. She had to get to Domenje. She desperately tried to get out from under the covers. With despair in her voice, she explained that Domenje doesn't tolerate absences. It's immediate dismissal. Yeonu couldn't believe it. Not even for a work-related injury? Her mother explained the harsh rules. Either find a replacement or clear out your desk. A replacement? An idea instantly formed in Yeonu's mind. Her mother was crying, lamenting that she had given so many years of her life to Domenje and couldn't just throw it all away. "Mom!" Yeonu said firmly. "You said you need a replacement? I'll go instead of you." She announced that she would be her substitute, and that was that. Her eyes burned with determination. She would go to Domenje. It was her only chance to hide. Meanwhile, in a dark room in Seoul, Cha Yun Seok dialed Yeonu's number again and again, only to hear that her phone was off. In a fit of rage, he hurled his phone against the wall, shattering it. He let out a maniacal laugh. He couldn't believe she had the audacity to do this. He was at her apartment again, pounding on the door and screaming her name. Realizing she was truly gone, he ground his teeth in fury. Skip, redundant emotion. He burst into the empty apartment, his shadow falling ominously across the floor. He tried calling again, but the result was the same. The subscriber was unavailable. In a rage, he swept everything off a table. How dare she run from him? He left her a voicemail, his tone shifting to a creepy, wheedling one. He asked if she had just gone out for some air. Sitting in the dark, he spoke into the void, apologizing and admitting his guilt, as if performing a play for an audience of one. His face was reflected in the broken glass, distorted by a crazed grin. He had warned her she couldn't get away from him. In his hand was a photo of Yeonu and her mother from her graduation. He hissed that she must have thought he was joking. He called someone again, ordering his men to find her. Let her hide like a rat. He would get her eventually. The next morning, Yeonu arrived at Domenje. The place was a landmark, listed as a cultural heritage site back in 1987. During the Joseon dynasty, it housed a study hall for Confucian scholars. And during the Japanese occupation, the building served as a school where students secretly learned Hangul. Seon Hyun's great-grandfather had donated most of the land to the state, keeping only the main building for the family. Yeonu stood before the massive wooden gates, feeling like a grain of sand on the threshold of history. She noticed the security cameras. The rumors were true. The security here was impressive. She used the intercom. When a voice asked, "Who is it?" she introduced herself and said she had an appointment with manager Moon-ok Rai. The gates slowly opened, letting her onto the grounds. She saw more cameras. Yes, a place like this was perfect for hiding. This was the place where no one would find her. Hope began to flicker in her heart again. She was met by a stern-looking elderly woman with glasses. This was Moon-ok Rai, the head manager of Domenje. She sized Yeonu up with a severe gaze. The interrogation began. Name, Yeonu, age, 29. The manager grunted. At that age, she must have worked somewhere before. Manager Moon was adamant. They couldn't just hire the first person who walked in. Besides, the job posting had been up for a while, and they already had a schedule of interviews. She advised Yeonu to go look after her mother in the hospital and turned to leave. Yeonu desperately rushed after her, asking what her mother was supposed to do. But the manager cut her off. That's how things worked at Domenje. If a position is vacant, the person leaves without a word. She added that Yeonu's mother knew this perfectly well. It was a blow to the girl. She couldn't let this happen. In a fit of desperation, Yeonu grabbed the manager's arm, pleading with her. The manager yelped in surprise and yanked her arm away. Yeonu immediately apologized. Moon Ok-rai was furious. She scolded the girl, reminding her that at Domenje, rules and principles were paramount. The women sternly said this wasn't some shop where you could get your way with tantrums. She glanced at Yeonu's slender wrists and asked contemptuously what kind of work she thought she could do with hands like those. She ordered her to stop being stubborn and head for the exit. Yeonu froze, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, nearby, a ribbon-cutting ceremony was taking place to mark the start of the Soryang Resort construction. Camera flashes were blinding as reporters eagerly captured every moment. Seon Hyun stood on the stage, ready for the ceremony. Beside him was Nam Yoon-young, the CEO of Seoul Group, and his aunt. She praised him for his hard work, but he humbly replied that the credit belonged to the president. She just smiled, knowing her younger brother's character. President Nam, meanwhile, was mentally fuming that his nephew had done all the work, and he didn't even get a thank you. His sister sympathetically noted that Seon Hyun had a tough time. Strolling through the garden, his aunt mentioned that his mother had loved magnolias, and his father had planted all these trees. Seon Hyun's face grew sad. He said quietly that the heavens can be so unfair sometimes. His memory took him back to the day of his parents' funeral. 2 portraits in black frames. He had been just a boy. His aunt held him, trying to comfort him. He had looked at the portraits with tears in his eyes, asking why his mom and dad's pictures were up there. His aunt snapped back to the present and apologized for bringing up sad things on such a bright day. Seon Hyun replied that such conversations no longer stirred any particular feelings in him. The pain had dulled with time. Manager Moon Ok-rai approached them. She reported that an employee had slipped and gotten injured that morning, and she supposed they would have to hire someone new. Yoon-young was annoyed, asking why the manager wasn't handling such matters herself. The woman explained that when the chairman's wife was alive, she had wanted to be informed about everything, so that was exactly what she had done. Yoon-young asked who was injured this time. The manager gave the name Shin Sun-mi, Yeonu's mother. At that very moment, Seon Hyun saw the dejected Yeonu in the distance, whom the manager had just sent away. He asked the manager who the girl was. She replied that it was the injured employee's daughter, who had dropped off a medical certificate and was just leaving. "Ah, the employee's daughter," Seon Hyun murmured thoughtfully, his gaze lingering on her. Yeonu felt crushed. She had been so sure they would hire her without question. Was there really no other way? She started down the path, but a voice behind her stopped her. It was Seon Hyun. He said that if she was lost, he could help. Yeonu turned around so sharply that she lost her balance. She began to fall straight backward. He deftly caught her, pulling her close. For a moment, their eyes met. Cherry blossom petals swirled around them as if in slow motion. He apologized and gently stepped back, releasing her. He asked what her business was here. Yeonu replied that she came to see Manager Moon. Seon Hyun looked at her shrewdly and asked if that meant her issue was already resolved. She quietly replied that it seemed so. Her voice was laced with disappointment. He understood. He clarified, asking if she meant she met with the manager, but didn't get to say what she wanted. Yeonu clenched her fists. She remembered his name, Ham Seon Hoon, the master of Domenje. Maybe this man could help her? A thought flashed through her mind. Maybe she should ask him for a job, using the incident at the bus stop as leverage. She gathered her courage and called out to him. He turned and calmly told her to speak without rushing, that there was plenty of time. But Yeonu hesitated. She realized it wasn't time she needed, but a bit of conscience to use his kindness for her own gain. Looking at his stern face, she couldn't bring herself to say anything. She just said she remembered the way to the exit and turned to leave. He stopped her with a question, asking if that meant she was done with her business at Domenje, taking her conscience with her. "Yes, I'm done," she replied quietly, not looking up. He watched her walk away in silence, a look of genuine interest in his eyes. Nightmares flooded her mind again, hands reaching for her from the darkness, and Yun Seok's whisper, promising to find her and make her bitterly regret running away. His words that he would only let her go after death echoed in her ears. She felt his touch everywhere, as if dark shadows were trying to drag her back to hell. Fortunately, it was only a dream. The main character woke up from it in a cold sweat. That night in the hospital room, sitting by her sleeping mother's bed, Yeonu cried softly. She wondered if she would ever manage to escape his grasp while she was still alive. Covering her face with her hands, she promised herself not to give up. Even if it meant swallowing her pride, she wanted to live. The next morning, Seon Hyun woke up in his apartment. He thought to himself that he could forget about alarms for a whole month, because this place had its own early morning alarms. He dressed slowly, buttoning his shirt. His thoughts returned to yesterday's encounter. The incident at the bus stop might have been a coincidence, but meeting a stranger in a private residence was just too unusual. He smirked at his own thoughts. Something about that girl had intrigued him. When he came out, the staff greeted him respectfully. The servants lined up and bowed, announcing that breakfast was ready. Manager Moon and the chef watched with bated breath as he tasted the food. The manager explained that there were no decent restaurants nearby, so they would be preparing his breakfast themselves. Seon Hyun replied that they shouldn't trouble themselves, as he could just eat with the staff. But Manager Moon was insistent. Feeding him and taking care of his needs was their primary duty. Seon Hyun didn't argue, simply asking them not to worry about the staff's meals, saying he would handle it himself. Off to the side, two maids began whispering. One asked if they should call for Yeonu, who had been waiting since dawn. The manager shushed her, ordering her to be quiet while the director was eating. Seon Hyun overheard their whispers, and wiping his mouth with a napkin, asked what was going on. The manager tried to brush it off, saying it was nothing. But Seon Hyun gave her a steely look and repeated his question. The maid couldn't hold back and blurted out that the injured employee's daughter had been waiting for him since dawn to say something very important. "Let her in," Seon Hyun ordered curtly. The manager tried to object, suggesting she could talk to the girl after he left for the office. She felt he shouldn't waste his time on such trivial matters. Seong-han turned to face her, his voice turning icy. He remarked that he hadn't previously noticed her talent for making him repeat himself twice. He ordered her to invite the girl in so he could hear her out personally. The manager had no choice but to comply. Seon Hyun wondered, what words had made her forget yesterday's pride? He was eager to find out why she had returned. Yeonu stood at the gate, gathering all her courage. This was no time for propriety. She knew that Cha Yun Seok would quickly figure out her mother's address. It was only a matter of time. A maid invited her in. She sat in a room, a place that looked like a fragment of a detached castle. This place was history itself. She had to get inside, under the protection of Domenje, where no one could touch her. She needed to push aside yesterday's awkwardness and have a serious talk with the manager. She stood to greet the manager as she entered, but froze. Seon Hyun was standing before her. He said he thought her business at Domenje had concluded yesterday, but it seemed he was mistaken. He gestured for her to sit, ready to listen. Manager Moon stood frozen in the doorway, her face unreadable. Yeonu's mind suddenly went completely blank, especially under his piercing gaze. Seon Hyun glanced at his watch. He said he would wait for her to collect her thoughts, but unfortunately, he was short on time. He wanted to hear the purpose of her visit. Yeonu felt like a pathetic beggar. Not even 24 hours had passed since their first meeting. She mentally ordered herself to get a grip. What did pride matter now? She began to speak. In place of Shin Sun-mi, who was injured on the job, she, her daughter, would like to temporarily fill the position. She took a resume from her bag, explaining she'd brought it hoping for at least an interview. She assured him she was a harder worker than she looked and would do any task. Tears welled in her eyes. She pleaded with him not to let her mother just disappear from Domenje, adding that she didn't even need to be paid. Seon Hyun listened in silence, his fingers interlaced. His face remained impassive. "I sincerely ask this of you," she finished. He thought for a moment and agreed. Yeonu couldn't believe her ears. She asked if she could really start working. He answered with a question of his own. Wasn't that why she came? She jumped up and bowed deeply, thanking him profusely and promising to work very hard. He stopped her. Her words about doing any task he asked, he suggested she prove them with her actions. He added that he disliked people who couldn't take responsibility for their promises. Did it really work? Yeonu stood in a daze, still not believing her luck. Manager Moon handed her a thick book. It was the Domenje rulebook. She ordered her to take it and memorize it down to the last letter. The manager warned that they had their own laws here, and since Yeonu was here to look after someone else's property, she could forget about an easy life. She would get a uniform soon and a name badge in a week. She also warned that if Yeonu was used to a normal office schedule, she wouldn't last here. And if she dared to whine about weekends or holidays, she'd be out the door. Yeonu firmly replied that she would strictly follow the rules. The manager was surprised. Well, it seems the girl can talk after all. But she immediately added in her mind that with such a fragile body, which looked like it could be carried away by the wind at any moment, she wouldn't be able to get much work done. And one last thing, once you enter Domenje, there are no vacations until she allows it. That meant not a single step outside the gates. The manager was sure this would be a bolt from the blue for the girl. So many young people had quit over that. But Yeonu beamed. "Yes, perfect!" she exclaimed. The manager was taken aback by her reaction. She couldn't understand what was so perfect about it, since it meant no meetings with friends or a boyfriend. But Yeonu assured her she had neither, so it suited her just fine. The manager wondered in confusion what kind of life she had been living. With a sigh, she waved her hand. "Fine, give it a try." Yeonu showered her with thanks. The manager told her to call her mother and tell her not to look for her for the time being. Yeonu happily agreed. Finally, she was safe. Manager Moon Ok-rai turned and walked away, her stern demeanor promising nothing good. She was the oldest employee, having worked at Domenje for 59 long years. Her life had not been easy. After losing her father at 17, she came to Domenje through a distant relative's connection. She had 8 younger siblings to feed. In those days, Domenje was like a battlefield where she worked tirelessly. Her days were a blur of endless laundry and beating clothes with paddles in icy water. She lived and ate at Domenje, sending her entire salary to her family. By dedicating her entire life to this place, she became its most devoted employee. At 76 years old, all manager Moon Ok-rai had left was Domenje. She knew this was not a welcoming enough place to be constantly smiling. In his office, Seon Hyun reflected on Yeonu's request. He recalled how many people used to ask him for a second chance or for help. Back then, he didn't care. Seon Hyun had seen many people ruined in the process of contract termination. He was a ruthless businessman. And yet, why had he made an exception for this woman? Amidst the roar of machinery and sweaty workers on the construction site, this girl, who looked like a fragile fawn, had seemed so out of place. Something about her had made him go against his own rules. His thoughts were interrupted by his secretary. A representative from Namseol Industrial Development was requesting a meeting. That was Yun Seok's company. Without looking up from his papers, Seon Hyun told him to schedule them for a week later. The secretary bowed and was about to leave. But Seon Hyun stopped him with a comment. He should use less cologne. The secretary froze. He had completely forgotten about the rule regarding perfume. He immediately apologized and promised to be mindful. He had his own unique philosophy on the matter. Seon Hyun hated the scent of perfume that invaded without warning. It seeped in before you had a chance to choose. It wasn't his style. He pushed the thought aside and announced the start of the meeting. Yeonu was in a taxi on her way to a clinic, a 20-minute drive away. She reviewed her plan in her head. First, get a health certificate for work, then get rid of her phone number. The taxi driver was chatty and expressed surprise that she had come from Domenje, a place not just anyone could enter. Yeonu smiled and said she'd gotten a job there. The driver was happy for her and wished her luck, telling her to work hard and stick with it. She had really made it into Domenje, and everything was going to be okay now. With a sense of relief, she looked out the window. She wouldn't have to face the world for a few months. Back at the residence, a maid showed Yeonu to her room. She thanked the woman for the phone call that had saved her. The maid warned her that the conditions here weren't like the main building. It was an old structure and needed to be aired out in the mornings. She also advised her to ignore Manager Moon's nagging, as there were plenty of other sharp-tongued people around. Yeonu thought that didn't sound too bad. At least she wasn't a common maid. She had feared being placed at the very bottom. But her colleagues sighed, saying that at least the maids get to go home. Their lives were easier. Left alone, Yeonu exhaled in relief. She felt calmer than she did at home. She threw open the window and happily spread her arms. It felt like she was coming back to life. She thought about how her mother must have lived while enjoying such beautiful scenery. Suddenly, she saw Seon Hyun walking on the path below. Panic seized her. What should she do? She instinctively ducked. But then she stopped herself. Why was she running? He was the one who helped her get into Domenje. She peeked out the window. Manager Moon had told her to be polite. She took a deep breath and bowed. Just then, the manager found her and started scolding her for slacking off while the director was present. Yeonu apologized, saying she didn't know he had arrived. "How could you not know? Didn't you take your radio?" the manager yelled. Another maid intervened, reminding her that the new girl didn't even have a uniform yet. The manager ordered her to get to sweeping the courtyard, but first to leave her phone number. Yeonu quietly admitted she didn't have a phone. The manager was shocked. None at all? At 20-something? Yeonu lied that she considered it a nuisance and got rid of it. The manager's face grew suspicious. She grabbed Yeonu's clothes and asked if the police were looking for her. Their conversation was interrupted by another maid calling for the manager. The manager let Yeonu go, telling her to find the shift supervisor at the guardhouse and get a radio from him. To herself, she thought the new girl was a strange one, definitely hiding something. Yeonu headed toward the main building. She decided the room needed some air. Everything inside was so modern. Word was, only the eldest sons of the family lived here. Sun Han was sitting in his study, deep in a book. Yeonu felt uneasy, like she'd intruded on his private space. He looked up and asked if she'd used the business card yet. She answered awkwardly that she hadn't yet. He told her to take care of it soon. Yeonu bowed. She said she was in his debt now and thanked him for giving her the job. She held out the crumpled business card, saying she wanted to return it. Something like this wasn't meant for her. Sun Han pulled a black credit card from his wallet, saying she didn't have to stick to the Solyang department store. Yeonu started to refuse, insisting the clothes hadn't been anything valuable. He held the card out to her. He told her that instead of clothes she wouldn't mind ruining, she should buy an outfit she'd actually be upset about losing. A few of them, even. Yeonu frantically waved her hands, saying that really wasn't necessary. But he insisted, explaining that it would make him feel better once the matter of compensation was settled. Yeonu realized that if she kept refusing, she wasn't getting out of that room. She took the business card back instead of the credit card. She bowed again and asked permission to leave. As she was walking out, she heard his voice behind her. He said that if she didn't use the business card, he'd take it as a sign she wanted something more substantial. Yeonu stepped out of the room, clutching the business card, completely at a loss. In the hallway, she was met by another staff member, Do Eunja. She asked pointedly whether Yeonu had dragged things out with the director on purpose. Eunja mentioned that Yeonu's mother had gone on and on about what a beauty her daughter was, and apparently, she hadn't been exaggerating. But she turned on her immediately, demanding to know who she'd gotten all dolled up for. That kind of thing wasn't allowed here. Yeonu tried to protest that she hadn't put anything on. Eunja didn't buy it and told her from now on it was wash your face and that's it. When Yeonu asked what she should do next, Eunja said with a snide smile that she'd think up something good, something to make sure life wasn't too easy for her. With a sly grin, she told her to follow along. Back in Sun Han's office, his secretary was going over a list of construction material suppliers with him. Sun Han found his thoughts drifting back to Yeonu. She knew his name, his workplace, and his title. But he knew nothing about her. Then again, why would he even need to know her name? He'd never cared about the names of staff before. He recalled asking her how long she planned to stay. She'd said around 3 months while her mother was in rehab. Catching himself thinking about her again and again, the man couldn't understand what was happening to him at all. His train of thought was interrupted by a cheerful voice. It was Nam Hyun-uk, his cousin. He'd just arrived and, instead of heading straight to Domenje, decided to swing by and see Sun Han first. Sun Han gave him a look, saying he could have at least given him a heads up. But Hyun-uk just laughed, thrilled the surprise had landed. Nam Hyun-uk, son of the Solyang construction president, had long since distanced himself from the family business. Unlike the Nam family tradition, he'd grown up easygoing and warm. He was a free spirit, the kind who could pack up and head out at a moment's notice with nothing but a camera. A traveler and photographer, someone who treated every trip like a celebration. Sun Han couldn't figure out what his cousin found so appealing about a dusty construction site, but Hyun-uk was loving every second of it. He went on about how the place was alive with the sweat of hard work and raw energy. Sun Han smirked and told him to roll up his sleeves and get to work alongside everyone else then. Hyun-uk said no immediately. He said there was no way he could keep up with that kind of pace. There was too much in the world worth seeing besides work. He suggested Sun Han ease up too and get some rest while his father wasn't around. Sun Han set down his coffee cup. He said the one who was actually resting right now wasn't him. It was his father. Hyun-uk agreed. Word was, his father had become little more than a figurehead. Sun Han sighed. His uncle acted more like a child than an adult, and Sun Han was the one making sure he stayed comfortable. Hyun-uk asked when he'd be done. Sun Han said about an hour. Hyun-uk started whining for him to just drop everything and come with him, but Sun Han warned he'd throw him out if he kept making noise. Hyun-uk gave up and sprawled out on the couch with his phone. He asked how long Sun Han was staying at Domenje. Sun Han said he'd come on a whim, so probably a week. Hyun-uk smiled, saying if something interesting came up, he'd stick around longer. Meanwhile, in the staff quarters, Eunja and Manager Moon were gossiping about Yeonu. Eunja called her a fox who'd wrapped more than a few men around her finger with those looks. Manager Moon cut her off, saying it was shameful to talk like that about an unmarried girl. But Eunja wouldn't let it go, taking a shot at the manager for spending her whole life dragging a gambling husband along. She accused Moon of just being jealous of the new girl's looks. In her imagination, Yeonu became a femme fatale at a club, and in her younger days, Eunja had been just as good. But the manager quickly brought her back down to earth and reminded her of what she looked like now. She added that they now had an advantage. They could forget about the stereotypes imposed on young people and simply live out their years in peace. The manager asked what the new girl was actually doing there. Eunja said she'd given her a full workload and figured the manager was trying to run the girl off. She was convinced Yeonu wouldn't last 3 days before she bolted. Meanwhile, Yeonu was sweating through cleaning a massive area. She was exhausted and had no idea how much was left. Earlier, she had asked Eunja when the work needed to be finished. Eunja merely scoffed, as if she would know such details. She guessed Yeonu could probably get through it in 3 days. Yeonu was horrified. A week wouldn't even be enough to get through all of this. And on top of everything, she was starving. Manager Moon found her there and asked with surprise why she was still standing around. Yeonu, who had changed into work clothes and put on pink rubber gloves, said she'd been washing dishes. The manager couldn't believe that had taken a whole day. Moon noted she hadn't seen her in the cafeteria and asked if she was on some kind of diet. The manager said that the girl would need to let them know over the radio whenever she was free. For now, however, she was ready to let her go and get some rest. But the main character interrupted her and firmly asked what exactly she was supposed to do now that she had finished with the dishes. The manager was surprised. Was she really planning to keep working? She still had a shift to get through. But she gave her a new task: sweep and air out Unsandan, where the executive director was wrapping up his work. To herself, the manager thought they'd gotten a tough one, not a simple girl at all. Outside, Seon-han and Hyun-uk were taking a walk. Hyun-uk remarked that Old Lady Moon was exactly the same. Nothing ever changed. He recalled how as a kid, he was always climbing the blooming tree, and Sun-han would come get him down. Sun-han pointed out it hadn't been that long since he was last here. He'd gone to school here, up through middle school. Hyun-uk said with a sigh that Domenje always made him feel at peace. Seong-han said that, since they had already had their walk, it was time for them to go inside and spend some time together. That evening, Yeonu was sweeping fallen petals in the garden. By some miracle, they all ended up in the same place together, though no one noticed the girl at first. Suddenly, Hyun-uk called her by name as if they were old acquaintances. She turned around. In the soft glow of the evening lanterns, her tired face looked especially moving. Hyun-uk came running up, calling her name with delight. He grabbed her hands, barely able to believe his eyes. Yeonu panicked. No one at this place was supposed to know her name. He introduced himself. Hyun-uk, Nam Hyun-uk. He reminded her they'd gone to school together at Damyeon Middle School. He mentioned that he'd heard she moved to Seoul, and every time he ran into her mother, he'd asked how she was doing. He was genuinely happy to see her and surprised she was working here. Yeonu could only mumble that it just kind of worked out that way. Hyun-uk laughed, saying there must have been a reason he'd been so drawn to Domenje. Sun-han watched the whole scene with an unreadable expression. His brother told him that the man could go ahead, as he would like to have a word with an old acquaintance. Instead of the peace he'd been looking forward to, Sun-han's head was buzzing with thoughts about this strange girl. Later, Hyun-uk tracked him down and offered him a beer. Sun-han noticed he looked suspiciously pleased with himself. Yeon-uk explained he'd run into an old classmate after all these years. Based on his reaction, Seong-han assumed that she had probably liked him in the past. Hyun-uk brushed it off, but then stopped to think. Maybe he had? He figured it would sort itself out in time. Yeonu was also turning the encounter over in her mind. She couldn't believe they'd actually been that close. She remembered him being class president, she thought. She recalled the particular warmth that had always surrounded him. She almost felt embarrassed by how genuinely happy he'd been to see her. She decided that next time they met, she'd greet him properly. Her thoughts were interrupted by Manager Moon, who told her that dinner had been set up at Unsandan for the director and young master Hyun-uk, and told her to keep a close eye on the radio. On her way out, the manager added that, if they get hungry, there were snacks set aside. She firmly told her not to take her eyes off the radio. Yeon-hu appeared so suddenly right beside her that the manager let out a startled yelp. She started grumbling that she wasn't a deaf old lady yet, and there was no need to sneak up right next to someone's ear. She asked irritably what else they wanted from her. The girl replied that she was already hungry. She asked the manager to feed her. The manager brought her a tray of food, grumbling about whether she'd gone hungry all day just to hold her up right before she left. She set the food on the table, warning her not to expect anyone to babysit her. Seeing Yeonu just frozen there, she asked if she'd bitten down on a rock or something. But Yeonu broke into a huge smile. She said it was just absolutely delicious. The manager gave an embarrassed cough, told her to stop talking nonsense, and started listing off all the premium ingredients that had gone into the food. She watched in disbelief as Yeonu wolfed everything down, and thought to herself just how starved the girl must have been. Yeonu apologized for keeping her, but the manager said going home could wait. She asked where Yeonu had been living in Seoul. Yeonu said she'd been working at a small architecture firm. The manager asked why she'd dropped everything and come all the way here. Yeonu paused, then admitted she'd quit her job. The woman was surprised and asked what the reason for the dismissal had been. Flashing through Yeonu's mind were the humiliating rumors from her coworkers that she'd been the one chasing after the vice president, that her looks had gone to her head, and when he turned her down, she'd thrown a fit. The manager snapped her out of it, hollering about whether she was chewing food or stretching gum. Yeonu realized the manager probably wouldn't understand the truth. It would only be worse if her mom ever found out. She lied and said the job just hadn't made her happy. The manager gave a skeptical grunt, doubting the work here would turn out to be her calling either. But Yeonu smiled and said that's genuinely how she felt. It was a lot more than she'd expected. She admitted that life in Seoul had worn her out, and she liked it here a whole lot more. She kept eating with appetite, but reminded herself she couldn't forget. She'd run away to save herself. Going back to Seoul was the last thing she wanted. She jumped up abruptly, saying she was done and was going to wash the dishes. She made up her mind to lie low and just get through this. No inviting trouble, no letting herself shrink. Meanwhile, Yun Seok sat in a dark room, thinking. She'd turned her phone off. Where the hell was he supposed to look for her? He was at his limit. One of his guys called. Yun Seok asked hopefully if they'd found her. But the answer was no. They'd looked everywhere, and there was nothing to go on. Yun Seok stubbed out his cigarette, furious. What was he even paying these people for? He asked where his guy was right now. The guy said he was keeping watch outside her house in her hometown. His plan was simple. A few sweet words to her mother through a fake letter, and the girl would reach out on her own. He assured his boss he'd never let him down. Yun Seok ordered him to keep watching until something turned up. He was sure it was only a matter of time. The next morning, Yeonu woke up feeling refreshed. Thanks to Manager Moon, she'd managed to sleep after her shift. She remembered how Moon had yelled at her to be at her post when the director arrived, but had let her lie down anyway. The second shift is easier than the first, she thought, feeling a surge of energy. Outside, she was greeted by a beaming Hyunuk. He was surprised to see Domenje already in full swing this early in the morning and greeted her. She also greeted him and called him the young master, just like everyone else addressed him. Yeonu looked flustered, but he explained that the people here just always called him that. Suddenly, he felt embarrassed and asked her not to say that again. He said she was up early, and he was just about to head to bed. Hyunwook admitted with a slight smile that he'd been living on a night schedule for a while, hinting at his bohemian lifestyle. Leaning in closer, he whispered conspiratorially that, to put it simply, he was just unemployed. He quickly joked that she shouldn't be jealous, because being unemployed wasn't actually all that fun. Yeonwoo, however, wasn't convinced. She genuinely didn't understand what could be so bad about that kind of freedom. Hyunwook theatrically covered his mouth, lamenting that no decent girl would look at an unemployed guy, and it seemed his love life was over. Yeonwoo couldn't resist a jab, wondering how a young master with a silver spoon could complain about unemployment. She thought the rich had gotten way too cocky. Hyunwook pouted, noticing she didn't even try to deny his words. He declared that she had gotten much colder since they'd last seen each other. At that moment, Seon Hoon walked past them, and his presence instantly changed the atmosphere. Hyunwook, not noticing him, continued to tease Yeonwoo, saying she wasn't such a brute back in school. She just calmly asked if that was really the case. In the man's eyes, it looked more like flirting than a simple conversation, especially when the girl gave him a sweet smile. Hyunwook noted warmly that it was nice to see her smile again, as she hadn't changed at all. Seon Hoon, feeling a bit stuffy, loosened his tie. The sight of a cheerful Yeonwoo next to his cousin stirred mixed feelings in him. For dinner, the staff suggested preparing a particular dish, that the man's cousin had loved since childhood. Seong Hoon agreed. Yeonwoo and manager Moon overheard him arranging to meet someone in the evening. As Sun Hoon left, the entire staff bowed respectfully, demonstrating his high status. Outside, he ran into Yeonwoo and coldly inquired where she was going. A bit nervously, she replied that manager Moon had asked her to pick up the mail. Sun Hoon said a short, "Let's go," his gaze filled with an unreadable determination. He walked beside her, which flustered Yeonwoo. She thought that, as a maid, she was supposed to walk ahead. Being near the director required her to weigh every word. He was the master of Domenje, and making a mistake was not an option. Suddenly, Sun Hoon broke the silence, asking how she was finding the work. Yeonwoo, startled, politely replied that everything was fine and thanked him for his concern. Sun Hoon was amused by her answer. He himself couldn't figure out when he had ever shown her any concern. His thoughts drifted to a conversation with Hyunwook, who recalled that Yeonwoo had been very popular in school and had an incredibly beautiful smile. Sun Hoon had doubted then that Hyunwook was describing the same girl. But now, seeing her, he was beginning to understand. Whenever she met him, her face was always stony and tense. He noted with irritation that she only looked so tense around him. But not around Hyunwook? The thought brought a pang of jealousy. Yeonwoo bowed again, wishing him a safe trip. He dryly remarked that one greeting was enough, as they had already seen each other. The girl got flustered, explaining that she just wanted to wish him a good day since they met at the exit. She added that she was taught to greet people every time she saw them, trying to justify her politeness. To change the subject, she asked if he had any errands for her. Sun Hoon thought, with a slight smirk, that he had already found out her name. And her age, too. He looked her straight in the eye and said he was just wondering what else he should find out about her. His direct interest made Yeonwoo nervous. Softening his tone, he smiled and said he was leaving. Yeonwoo was left standing in confusion, clasping her hands. His words, "found out her name and age," echoed in her mind. She couldn't figure out the meaning behind that phrase. Her thoughts were interrupted by the senior maid, who rudely poked her forehead, scolding her for standing like a statue instead of sorting the mail. The woman began to grumble that in her day, trainees had to be on duty for 100 days without a single day off. She angrily asked if Yeonwoo found it funny or if she was planning to protest. Yeonwoo calmly replied that she could hear her, which only angered the senior maid more. She snidely remarked that her ears were working, but it seemed she'd left her tongue at home. Setting down her cup, she ordered Yeonwoo to go clean up the warehouse. Then she added that she needed to do all the hand washing and be ready for a rice delivery. Lastly, she informed her that at 10 in the morning, 80 radishes for kimchi would arrive, and each one had to be scrubbed sparkling clean. But since the main character didn't respond, and not a single muscle in her face revealed any emotion, she was ready to start shouting like a madwoman again. However, she was interrupted before she could begin. Yeonwoo calmly listed the entire to-do list: deliver the mail, receive the radishes, haul the rice, do the hand washing, clean the warehouse, and in the evening, sweep the yard. The senior maid was speechless at such audacity and could only sputter, "Why, you little brat!" At that moment, Manager Moon appeared, scolding the maid for shouting, comparing her to a steam engine. The maid immediately started complaining that there was no peace in the corridors because of Yeonwoo, and that the newcomer was talking back and glaring at her. Manager Moon reasonably pointed out that she was the one constantly picking on the girl. Meanwhile, at a construction site, Sun Hoon was offered a snack in the office, and he agreed. One of the workers began telling the story for the 100th time of how he fell in love with his wife at first sight. His colleague laughed at him, asking if he'd been watching too many K-dramas about love at first sight. The worker passionately insisted it was the absolute truth. Sun Hoon, standing nearby, couldn't help but overhear their conversation. His secretary called out to him, pulling him from his thoughts. Sun Hoon believed that love at first sight was merely the psychology of a buyer falling for bright packaging, But the worker continued to romantically describe how his heart would skip a beat at the sight of his wife. For Seon Hoon, a man of logic and calculation, falling in love at first sight was complete nonsense. At the same time, back at the estate, Yeonwoo couldn't get their morning conversation out of her head. What was so special about a simple greeting? She thought that perhaps he was much kinder than he appeared at first glance. He hadn't made that impression on her before. Although he had apologized at the bus stop and given her a job, all of that was thanks to him. Yeonwoo decided he just had a kind heart and tried not to think about it anymore. Her thoughts were interrupted by Hyunwook, who appeared out of nowhere. She sighed that his sudden appearances would be the death of her. Yeonwoo asked if he had just woken up. He confirmed with a smile that he had overslept. He asked what she was doing, and she replied that she was washing dishes. Seeing the mountain of dishes, he was surprised she was washing them all alone. He immediately sat down next to her, noting that it just got a lot dirtier. Yeonwoo explained that she had volunteered, as it was quieter for her that way. Hyunwook said with a smile that he was just afraid of disturbing her. She thanked him shyly. He offered to help. Yeonwoo politely declined, saying that if the young master got his hands wet, she'd be in trouble later. But he had already plunged his hands into the water, ignoring her protests. He declared with a sly grin that he was already involved. Yeonwoo jokingly told him to get his hands out, but he just smiled widely. The main character muttered that if someone happened to see this, she would be the one to get in trouble. But arguing with him was pointless, so she simply told him to at least put on some gloves. Hyunwook boastfully declared that she was about to witness a priceless scene. Him, the slacker, scrubbing dishes until they sparkled. Yeonwoo watched him with a warm smile. She asked if their friendliness was a family trait. He replied that no, only he and his father had that kind of personality. But his cousin, whom she had seen, was a typical workaholic and a total stiff. Hyunwook added that he had never heard a single kind word from Seon Hoon. Yeonwoo pondered this. So, she had simply been mistaken in her conclusions about the director's kindness. Hyunwook playfully noted that he had promised to help, not do everything for her. She called him young master, and he immediately got indignant, reminding her he'd asked her not to call him that. Suddenly, he became serious. He invited her to their upcoming school reunion. At that time, Seon Hoon was on the phone, sorting through documents. He was leaving his office, continuing his business call. On the other end of the line, President Nam informed him that a French delegation was arriving the coming weekend. President Nam was on the golf course and asked him to speak quietly. He insisted that Seon Hoon handle the delegation, as he was young and had all the advantages. Seon Hoon coldly replied that he would get the details from his secretary and was about to hang up, which annoyed his father. President Nam asked if he knew that Hyunwook was already there. Seon Hoon confirmed that he had bolted the same day they had argued. President Nam enviously remarked that at least Hyunwook had somewhere to run, and advised Seon Hoon to smile more often. Seon Hoon, tired of the conversation, claimed he had a meeting and hung up. In the evening, a table laden with seafood was served for dinner. Hyunwook joked, asking if they were in an aquarium. He complained that Manager Moon had overdone it again and asked if he and Seon Hoon were supposed to eat all of this by themselves. The manager grimly joked that if there was too much food, they could invite their ancestors, since so many people had died there over the years. Horrified, Hyunwook begged her not to say such things. She noted that their young master struggled to even say a simple thank you for the food. Hyunwook immediately complimented her, saying he'd never met anyone smarter. Seon Hoon sat at the table alone. He hadn't run into Yeonwoo after work. He poured himself a drink, noting to himself that her area, Yunsondong, hadn't even been swept yet. Since his cousin still addressed him formally as Hyung, Seong-han asked that they put formalities aside when they were at home. Suddenly, Seon Hoon froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. But a strange feeling pursued him, as if time was pushing him from behind, just like that worker at the construction site. He took a sip, wondering where it all began. Over dinner, Hyun-wook asked for permission to host the school reunion at Domenje. Seon Hoon replied that he was family and could do as he pleased. Hyun-wook admitted that habit was a powerful thing, and he still felt like he needed permission for any action within the estate. Manager Moon, speaking into her walkie-talkie, asked where the new servant was. The reply came that she was heading towards Yunsondang. Seon Hoon wiped his lips with a napkin. Hyun-wook was surprised he had finished eating so quickly. Seon Hoon told him to take his time and come by later. Hyun-wook watched him leave with a bewildered look. He thought his cousin must have had too much to drink, judging by his face. Yeonwoo was delayed by errands and was rushing to finish cleaning while the masters were having dinner. She was cleaning Seon Hoon's study. All that was left was to sweep. His words about finding out her name and age popped into her head again. She thought she should have given him that information earlier, and that should have been enough of an answer. The reason for her aloofness towards him lay in his image, the embodiment of masculine maturity and power. After all, Cha Yun Seok, her stalker, had effectively... If she believed in kindness and let her guard down, the nightmare could repeat itself. Therefore, she decided it was vital to keep her distance. Suddenly, Seon Hoon appeared behind her, flushed and breathing heavily. He asked if she was done with her work. The main character got startled again, stumbled again, and once more fell straight into his arms. And once again, he caught her, steadied her, and found himself standing far too close to her. Then he said that one injured servant was more than enough, so the main character should be more careful. He looked into her eyes and added that he hoped she was okay. Seon Hoon quietly said that finding a replacement for her would be extremely difficult. Yeonwoo, coming to her senses, apologized, saying she hadn't noticed him arrive and was startled. From that moment on, he decided to do something he had never done before. She asked him to repeat himself, not understanding what he meant. He continued, saying he was going to do things he wasn't used to and didn't even particularly like. Things he could have easily done without his whole life, but now decided to try. For example, asking for something. Yeonwoo looked at him and understood that his strange behavior wasn't due to alcohol at all. Seon Hoon looked her straight in the eye and asked her to give him her time on the upcoming weekend. She asked hesitantly if she had heard him correctly. He explained that partners were flying in from France, and it would be difficult for him to handle it alone. He needed someone to smile in his place. Yeonwoo pictured the scene and couldn't hide her bewilderment. Smile? He needed someone to smile? She said she would be happy to help, but she thought he had made the wrong choice. She wasn't the type to smile often. Seon Hoon objected, saying she had a beautiful smile. Yeonwoo was shocked. Had he seen her smile often? She was sure he had mistaken her for someone else, as she felt she didn't even know how to do it. He calmly replied that, of course, nothing like that had happened in his presence yet. He had seen her with Hyun-wook, and she was smiling very sweetly then. Yeonwoo shook her head, insisting that no matter how you looked at it, she wasn't right for the role. Seon Hoon said he would be grateful if she considered it part of her work duties. He added that he would ask his secretary to pick out and send her an evening dress, and even offered to accompany her if she wanted to try it on personally. She replied that she wasn't confident, and for such an important event, they should find someone else. He cut her off. Here are no other candidates. The next day, Yeonwoo returned with the mail. The senior maid immediately accosted her, asking where she had been, as the director was already having lunch. Seon Hoon, sitting at the table, calmly addressed Manager Moon. He informed her that Ji Yeonwoo would not be able to work this weekend and asked her to handle it. The senior maid was in shock. Manager Moon obediently agreed, while her colleague wondered what business the director could have with the new girl. Seon Hoon explained that there was a dinner with foreign partners, and he needed an assistant. The maid began to complain that the new girl knew nothing about such matters and could only scrub plates. Manager Moon jabbed her hard in the side to shut her up. Seon Hoon shot them an icy glare. The maid stammered that she was only worried out of concern for the director's affairs. He calmly replied that he had taken into account Yeonwoo's experience as a secretary and that the employees from the head office valued their weekends too much. These days, according to him, regular employees were the most formidable force. He added that he couldn't very well take Manager Moon or her colleague with him. Manager Moon obediently agreed that she would only get in the way. Seon Hoon turned to Yeonwoo, asking what she had decided about the evening dress. She replied that she hadn't decided yet. She thought that if she stepped outside Domenje, Cha Yun Seok might track her down. Seon Hoon suggested she buy the dress herself and provide a receipt for reimbursement. Manager Moon advised her colleague to keep her mouth shut, otherwise she wouldn't die of natural causes. Yeonwoo, realizing it was too late to order online, asked the manager if there was a place nearby where she could get an evening dress. The manager and her colleague exchanged a look. They had an idea. They took her to their old acquaintance, an eccentric atelier owner, who greeted them boisterously. The manager's colleagues immediately began showering the master with compliments. Manager Moon explained that they needed to make a good impression and needed her help. She told Yeonwoo to say hello. Yeonwoo, dressed in simple clothes, greeted her modestly. The atelier owner was delighted, exclaiming what a beauty stood before her. She grabbed Yeonwoo's hands, admiring their delicacy, and declared that when it came to choosing dresses, she was the best in all of Korea. Manager Moon asked her to do her best, so the director wouldn't have to be embarrassed by Yeonwoo. The master replied that her inspiration had awakened, the likes of which she hadn't felt in 100 years. She declared that she had found her second wind, and immediately suggested trying on a bright pink dress to start. Yeonwoo looked at them doubtfully, wondering if she could trust them at all. That evening, Seon Hoon was ready to leave. Yeonwoo, cleaning his study, greeted him and said she would be finished shortly. She explained that it had been very dusty outside during the day, so it was better to air out the room later. Seon Hoon asked if she was ready. She replied that she had bought the dress through Manager Moon, so no reimbursement would be necessary. When asked if she needed anything else, he said no and told her to go get ready. Yeonwoo was about to leave, but Seon Hoon stopped her, reminding her that she was going to air out the room. She remembered and promised to open everything and leave right away. The girl went to the window and opened it, letting in the fresh evening air. After that, she bowed and left. His gaze was thoughtful and a little distant. Sometime later, at the hotel, Seon Hoon's secretary asked Yeonwoo to wait while he handled the check-in. Left alone in the middle of the bustling lobby, Yeonwoo felt uneasy. A wave of fear washed over her. There was a real risk of running into Cha Yun Seok here. She thought her condition had stabilized over the past few days, but now the panic was back. Her heart was pounding, and she desperately wanted to return to the safe walls of Domenje. Seon Hoon approached her, noticing that she wasn't responding to his voice. He said she didn't look well. Yeonwoo lied, saying she was just a little carsick from the drive. He advised her to go up to her room and rest while there was still time. He watched her go, noting to himself how pale she looked. Seon Hoon wanted to know if she was feeling better, but he realized he didn't even have her phone number. He realized they had never exchanged numbers. He dialed her room from the landline and asked if she was getting ready. He scheduled their meeting in the lobby in 2 hours. After hanging up, he still couldn't tell if she had recovered. Yeonwoo, still hesitant, told him over the phone that she had tried on the outfit but wasn't sure if it was appropriate. He replied curtly that he was on his way and immediately headed to her room. He rushed over as fast as he could and even ended up out of breath. Yeonwoo opened the door a crack, sheepishly saying there was a bit of a situation. She stepped into the hallway wearing a loud, sparkly blue dress that she felt was far too gaudy and flashy. Seon Hoon covered his mouth to hide his shock. She had expected a classic evening gown. She began to apologize, saying she should have clarified the style earlier, but back at Domenje, this outfit had seemed the most suitable. She remembered how the atelier owner had dressed her up like a fairy tale princess, marveling at her beauty. All the ladies had been absolutely thrilled with how well the bright colors suited her. Seon Hoon, recovering from his shock, unexpectedly noted to himself that it didn't look half bad. She was offended by his lukewarm assessment. He countered that what mattered wasn't the outfit itself, but the fact that it suited her. He asked her to turn around, carefully examining her from all sides. When she turned around, he noticed the deep cutout on the back of her dress that dipped all the way down to her lower back. His inner critic was merciless. In his imagination, he was already scolding her, asking how she dared to wear such a vulgar rag. Yeonwoo realized she had made an unforgivable mistake and decided it would be best for her to stay home. But Seon Hoon was already calling Chief Hwang. He ordered him to contact the nearest boutique and get a decent evening dress for a young woman. He described her height, roughly up to his shoulder, and added that she was beautiful. Yeonwoo listened to his words, a blush creeping up her cheeks. He ended the call, ordering them to choose something respectable as time was short. Hanging up, he told her she had heard everything, and all they could do now was wait. She quietly agreed. He turned and asked how she was feeling. Yeonwoo just nodded shyly, unable to utter a word. He watched her reaction with a slight smile. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Manager Moon was visiting Yeonwoo's mother, who was complaining that all she could do in a cast was lie flat. The manager started nagging that she had told her to be more careful, but the mother asked her not to nag since she had come to visit a patient. Manager Moon, peeling a fruit, wondered what kind of fool would send their own daughter to work at Domenje. She advised her to persuade her daughter that she needed to return to Seoul and start building her life there as soon as possible. Yeonwoo's mother countered, why on earth would her daughter need to look for a new job? She said that Yeonwoo was just on vacation. Manager Moon frowned, realizing she had been lied to. As soon as she left the hospital, she muttered under her breath about how the main character's mother had first piled up a mountain of dirty laundry, and now she had to deal with it. She thought it was a good thing they found a replacement for the laundry, otherwise things would have been really tough. She didn't even know that the girl's mother was unaware of the dismissal, so the fact that another topic had come up was a relief, as it spared her from continuing the awkward conversation. But why had the girl lied in the first place? The mother didn't understand her own daughter, even though she was her own flesh and blood. She guessed that Yeonwoo had made something up just to keep her mother from worrying. She demanded that Sunmi make her daughter leave Domenje as soon as possible. Manager Moon sternly said that she didn't send her daughter to university just for her to be a housemaid. Sunmi tried to hold her back to get more details, but she brushed her off, saying there was a whole house's worth of laundry to do. She promised to wash everything and bring it back. As she left, Manager Moon realized she was afraid of saying too much if she continued the conversation. She looked around, her intuition telling her that danger was nearby. Suddenly, one of Yun Seok's men approached her and asked if she knew a local resident named Shin Sun-mi. She warily asked who was asking. The man rudely demanded to know if she knew her or not. Deciding he could dismiss the old woman, he pulled a photograph from his pocket. He showed her the photo, demanding she identify the girl. The photograph was of a smiling Ji Yeonwoo. At the hotel, assistants were helping Yeonwoo put on a new piece of jewelry that they thought perfectly suited her features. Seon Hoon personally fastened the necklace around her neck, asking if it was bothering her. She thanked them, saying everything was wonderful. Looking at her reflection, she gave herself a command. She had to smile no matter what and look flawless. She remembered Seon Hoon's request. He needed someone to smile for him. And there she stood before him in an elegant black dress, ready to fulfill her task. Seon Hoon, giving her an appraising look, said curtly, "Let's go." The dinner began, its purpose to sign a contract with French investors. Their side's position required them to adapt to the guest's mood to ensure the dialogue went smoothly. Yeonwoo, reciting a memorized phrase in French, gave a sweet smile. Her eyes met the investors. She smiled, and he smiled back. She thought with relief that he seemed to be in a good mood. After dinner, Seon Hoon informed them that he had sent them a copy of the contract. The translator relayed the guest's words, that it was an honor to dine with such a beautiful lady. Yeonwoo politely replied that it was a pleasure for her as well. She hoped everything had gone well. Suddenly, the investor took her hand. He gallantly kissed her hand, which made the girl blush deeply. She could only stammer out a "thank you." When the guests left, she thought with relief that it was all over. She turned to the director to say goodbye as well. But he stopped her, asking what she was apologizing for. She guessed that her smile hadn't been sincere enough. He called her hopeless and headed for the elevator. Yeonwoo didn't understand why he was angry and why he was hesitating. Seon Hoon was reflecting on the dinner, where hundreds of billions in investments were at stake. The representative from the French side looked like he had lost his mind from beginning to end. Bince, this madman, had agreed to terms favorable to them. Okay. It could be considered that Ji Yeonwoo had completed her task. He turned to the girl and said he never would have thought she was like that, made people so nervous with her mere presence. He confessed that he couldn't take his eyes off her. The moment he looked at her, he would get lost in his thoughts and lose his business focus. That's why he had desperately tried to ignore her presence. But when he noticed that lecherous gaze the investor was giving her, he couldn't understand why he was tolerating such indecency for the sake of some money. Yeonwoo, not understanding his thoughts, asked if she had made a mistake. He replied that it wasn't her fault. He assured her that she had done everything right, and thanks to her, the negotiations were successful. She smiled with relief, happy that the contract was in the bag. Seon Hoon thought that everything had gone almost too well, to the point of being nauseating. He understood the investor's feelings. It was impossible to look away from her. He was sure the investor's heart was pounding out of his chest. The man had lit up with happiness every time she smiled at him. Seon Hoon admitted to himself that he would have been lost in his place too. He took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, saying the night air was chilly. Yeonwoo gratefully accepted his gesture. Her shoes were hurting her feet. He offered her his arm to hold on to. He didn't want her to fall. He suggested they take a short walk, if she didn't mind. They walked in silence through the night park, lit by strings of lights. Yeonwoo breathed out in awe at the beauty around them. He agreed that the view was very peaceful. She was surprised by that word, peaceful. She thought that she could finally breathe calmly, forgetting the fear that someone was about to grab her by the scruff of the neck. Seon Hoon called her name, bringing her back to reality. She remembered that he wanted to discuss something. He said her name again. He said that she had come to Moksan before her mother was injured, as their first meeting was at the bus stop. He asked her directly why she had left Seoul. She replied that she just wanted a better life, as some difficulties had arisen in Seoul. She had planned to rest for a bit and then return, but circumstances had changed. She said she would stay here for a while, gather her strength, and then go back. She wasn't sure if she had answered his question. Seon Hoon unexpectedly asked if Hyunwook was in love with her. Yeonwoo was stunned. She hastened to assure him that they were just former classmates. She promised that if he wished, she would avoid meeting Hyunwook at Domenje. She clarified that she had no plans for any romantic relationships in this city. She honestly admitted that she even felt disgust toward men. He smirked, calling it a rather blunt clarification. She apologized, asking if he suspected her and Hyunwook of something. He replied that he just wanted to clarify the situation. She asked if he had wanted to talk about Hyunwook. He answered firmly, "Of course not." He said that what he'd heard was enough. He didn't want to disgust her. The next day, Yeonwoo returned to the estate and gave the senior maid a small bag. She had brought bread from the hotel bakery and a small gift. The maid was delighted with the lovely jade bracelet, noting that the new girl had taste. She showed off the gift to Yeonwoo, who smiled and said the outfit was quite beautiful. At that moment, Manager Moon appeared and started shouting at Yeonwoo, asking why she had only just shown up when the director had been back since morning. She scolded her for not being more composed when accompanying such an important person. The manager ordered her to stay on duty for the day. The senior maid wondered why their sister was so worked up. Manager Moon gritted her teeth and said she was perfectly calm. But her colleague wouldn't let it go, and the manager snapped at her. She was acting that way because she still couldn't forget the situation with the people who had been asking about the new girl. The woman managed to wriggle out of it. She started saying that he must have approached her in order to buy underwear. He left the elderly lady, calling her insane. After he left, the woman muttered quietly that she had known it all along. The newcomer was no ordinary girl. After returning from the hotel, life at the estate became hectic. The construction of the resort had begun, and the days flew by in a flurry of activity. Yeonwoo, carrying groceries, saw Sun Hoon. He had been gone all weekend and had shown up early today. Manager Moon told her to take off her apron and go to the construction site with Chief Hwang. Then she handed her a lunchbox for the director, ordering her to deliver it personally. Yeonwoo hoped everything had gone smoothly at the hotel. She agreed with a smile. At the construction site, the secretary called out to her, saying she needed to go to the office. She introduced herself and said she had brought lunch for the executive director. The secretary said the director had a meeting soon and led her to the office. He knocked and announced that lunch had arrived. Yeonwoo entered and relayed Manager Moon's message that he had left without breakfast, so he should have a proper lunch. Sun Hoon smirked when he heard that she was asked to help out due to a shortage of hands. He looked at her and said it had been a while since they'd seen each other. She quietly said that, despite everything, she was fine, and he joked that it seemed things really were better when she didn't see him. The main character didn't know what to say and panicked, but he explained that it was just a joke and nothing more. Everything was actually fine. She hurried to excuse herself, saying she needed to help her colleagues. He said with a smile that he didn't even know if it was appropriate to say he was glad to see her, fearing she might start shaking again. She mumbled, "Enjoy your meal," and hurried to the exit, but then the secretary announced a visitor. Yeonwoo realized this was the important meeting, and she needed to leave quickly. The man who entered the office was her nightmare, Cha Yun Seok. He looked at her with a predatory smile and said her name. Yeonwoo froze in terror, unable to breathe. He said he had been looking for her for a long time. Sun Hoon looked at the document he had brought. It was from Namsol Industrial Development, the very same company from Ji Yeonwoo's resume. Yun Seok asked her to wait, as he was a little busy. Panic seized Yeonwoo. Sun Hoon coldly told her she was free to go. When she didn't move, he repeated that he had told her to get back to work. The main character wanted to leave. Her whole body had frozen, especially under that man's gaze. He smiled and said goodbye, promising to see her later. Left alone, Yun Seok and Sun Hoon exchanged tense glances. Yun Seok apologized for the interruption and introduced himself. Sun Hoon figured this must be President Chagilok's son, sent to learn the ropes before taking over the business. During the conversation, his guest had to make a phone call, and it sounded quite tense. He apologized, saying the documents were final, but Sun Hoon noted it would have been better if the responsible employee had come. Yun Seok arrogantly replied that he wasn't used to dragging an entourage around. He complained about the dust, hinting that he felt suffocated within four walls. He invited Sun Hoon to a new club sometime, where he had connections. But the man didn't respond. He ignored it. Yun Seok realized that the other man had noticed his tattoos. He asked rhetorically whether his interlocutor thought he had too many drawings on his body, and then answered himself that as a child, he had dreamed of becoming an artist. But he didn't get to finish. Seong-han said that he probably wanted to be a canvas, not an artist. Yun Seok, ignoring him, complimented Sun Hoon, saying he was damn good-looking. Sun Hoon cut him off, coldly asking for his name. Yun Seok was annoyed at being constantly interrupted. He introduced himself, Cha Yun Seok. Sun Hoon corrected him, calling him vice president. The man replied that he had misspoken. Sun Hoon dryly remarked that he wasn't used to doing business with anyone ranked lower than a president. He gave Yun Seok permission to leave, expressing doubt that they would see each other again soon. As he was leaving, Yun Seok asked if that female employee was a local. Sun Hoon replied that she worked at Domenje. Yun Seok now knew where she was hiding. He stated that she was his former subordinate, and it was just like her to hide away in such a backwater place. Seon Hoon asked with a narrowed gaze if he had been looking for her. When asked if she owed him money, Yun Seok replied, it wasn't about something so trivial. He claimed he had given her his heart, but she kept rejecting him. He licked his lips and added lustfully that he thought he had asked for her body. Seon Hoon's mind flashed back to Yeonwoo's words about something difficult to bear happening in Seoul, and that the mere mention of men disgusted her. Yun Seok, seeing his reaction, said it was a joke and that he couldn't stand excessive seriousness. Seon suggested they have lunch at Domenje sometime. Seon Hoon coldly replied that he would send the schedule through his secretary. His gaze was as cold as steel. He knew what kind of man he was dealing with. The meeting seemed to destroy the main character. Memories came back suddenly and forcefully invaded her mind. An image of herself trapped in a glass box flashed in her mind. Yun Seok's voice whispered, "You can't escape." Yeonwoo, hiding in the courtyard, covered her mouth with her hand. She couldn't just sit back. She had to get out of there. But the ghost of her pursuer was everywhere. What could she do? What was she going to do now? Despair washed over her. The senior maid approached her, showing off her new bracelet. She told her that the other girls were pestering her, asking where she had bought such a lovely thing. Seeing tears in Yeonwoo's eyes, she got scared, wondering if she was crying because of her. Yeonwoo grabbed onto her clothes, pleading for help. She fell to her knees, sobbing and begging to be saved. Her cries attracted the attention of Manager Moon. The maid immediately started making excuses, saying she wasn't the one who made her cry. Manager Moon sent her away and stayed with Yeonwoo alone. She said she had been meaning to talk to her today anyway. They sat by the pond, and the manager asked directly if some thugs were after her. She demanded that Yeonwoo stop sniffling and tell her everything. Yeonwoo, gathering her courage, admitted that she was indeed being pursued. She explained that her former boss was stalking her, and she had run away. Manager Moon told her not to cry, as she had done nothing wrong. She demanded to be told every single detail. She patted her back in a motherly way. The manager declared that since Yeonwoo was at Domenje, this was no longer her personal problem, but a matter for the entire estate. Meanwhile, in some office, Yun Seok's subordinate was on the phone, saying he was 100% sure she would run back to her hometown. He was just about to look up information on Domenje, as he had heard her mother was in charge there. He asked Yun Seok what the plan was now. Yun Seok, lighting a cigarette, asked what he meant. The subordinate clarified what they were going to do about Ji Yeon-woo. Yun Seok replied that he would drag her to Seoul, despite the fact that outsiders were forbidden at Domenje. He smugly declared that they would lure her out, no problem. He was confident she would come out willingly, and he would personally see to it. She would simply have no choice but to leave Domenje. Yun Seok ordered him to look up one more person. The executive director of Solyang Construction, Ham Seon Hoon. The subordinate wondered why he was needed. Yun Seok replied that because of the incident with Yeonwoo, he had almost ended up behind bars. His father had barely managed to smooth things over with money, and now it was time to repay the favor by beautifully closing the project. He gave his man a week to dig up dirt on Seon Hoon. Leaning back on the sofa, he thought that Yeonwoo seemed to be in deep trouble. Yeonwoo asked the manager how she knew she was being followed. She replied that she had seen the thug at the hospital when she was seeing her mother off. She described him as having a face that was begging for a brick and a look like he could eat a bear alive. Yeonwoo admitted her fault. The manager said that in her 60 years, this was the first time such problems had come to Domenje. She had sensed something was wrong when Yeonwoo got rid of her phone. The woman said that for now, she couldn't say she believed it 100%, just based on his word. The manager added that one shouldn't judge after hearing only one side of the story. She told her not to hold a grudge and ordered her to leave like a human being, doing things properly instead of trembling in fear. She shook her, telling her to square her shoulders and work confidently, because riffraff had no business within the walls of Domenje. She also strictly forbade her from chattering in front of the executive director. Manager Moon and Yeonwoo walked across the bridge, their silence more eloquent than any words. In the office, Seon Hoon was checking documents brought by a subordinate. He focused on studying the list of pipe suppliers, but he couldn't concentrate. His breathing kept hitching for no apparent reason. As he got closer to Yunsendang, he was overcome by unwelcome, feverish feelings. He heard the familiar shuffling sound of a broom. It was Yeonwoo. She was sweeping the courtyard against the sunset. For him, this was proof of her presence here. She bowed, greeting him. She said she was almost done sweeping, but he noticed she'd been crying. And by the looks of it, for quite a while. He debated whether to push any further, but now he thought he understood. There was no point asking why she'd been crying. She said something had come up, but it was personal, and asked him to pretend he hadn't seen anything. He pushed back. How was he supposed to ignore something he'd already seen? She reminded him that employees were entitled to a personal life too. He told her she should do a better job of keeping her emotions in check then. She looked like she'd crumble to the ground with the slightest nudge. What was there to pretend about? She let out a sigh, saying life was just complicated. She felt like she'd been giving everything she had, never once reaching for anything grand. But it seemed like she'd taken a wrong turn somewhere, and it was nobody's fault but her own. Seon Hoon stepped closer and told her she was doing fine. She was living her life with dignity. He assured her that her past hadn't been wasted, and her future was only going to get better. He asked her to just trust him on that. Her eyes filled with tears. She thought he probably had no idea what he was talking about. He wasn't going to be her protector, and she had no intention of leaning on him for support. But somehow, all the chaos inside her suddenly went quiet. Like nothing had happened, like everything was going to be okay. He thanked her. He said her words had helped him turn his doubts into a firm decision. Late that evening, Seon Hoon was on a call with Chief Yoom from his department. Chief Yoom reported that they'd managed to dig up information on Namsol development, and someone had taken an interest in the president's son. Seon Hoon confirmed. He was talking about Cha Yun Seok.
Oh my God, I don't even know where to start. This scenario is incredible. Villainess's Love is one of those webtoons that makes your heart race twice as fast. First, I have to say, Cha Yun Seok is absolutely terrifying. Seriously, he's a psychopath. And what I love is that they don't try to romanticize him or make him seem charming. No, he's a real threat, a real horror that Yeonu experiences. I appreciate that the story doesn't hide this, doesn't turn his stalking into some romantic moment. It's scary. It's real. But the most beautiful part of this webtoon is how Ham Seon Hoon becomes Yeonu's anchor. Not as a savior, but as someone who's simply there for her. Do you remember when he tells her, "Your past wasn't wasted"? That's the moment that makes you cry. Usually, in romantic webtoons, the male lead is either too soft or too controlling. But Seon Hoon is reserved, calculating, but also, when he gets jealous about Hyun Wook. That's so fresh. And Yeonu, God, she's so strong. Yes, she's afraid. Yes, she's traumatized. But she lives. She's not just a victim waiting to be saved. She saves herself. She works, she recovers, she acts. And Domenje as a setting, it becomes a character itself. Old walls, security cameras, strict rules. For Yeonu, this place becomes a sanctuary. For others, it would be a prison. For her, it's freedom. That's genius. But I have to be honest, there are things I would change. Maybe a little more screen time for their first serious conversation? And their relationship develops quite quickly in some places. I would want more awkward moments, more doubt from her side. Because Yeonu has trauma, and she trusts him pretty fast. Also, the ending of the first 3 chapters leaves us with Seon Hoon finding out something about Yun Seok, and it creates such tension. I want to know what happens next. How will he protect her? Will he get involved? Now, some questions for your comments section. Who do you like more, Seon Hoon or Yoon Seok? And don't worry, it's just for the plot. Do you think Seon Hoon can protect Yeonu from Yoon Seok? Or will it get out of control? What was your favorite moment? For me, it's when she says she feels disgust toward men. Such a contrasting moment. Do you want Yeonu to tell Seon Hoon the whole truth in the next chapters? Or should he figure it out himself? Whose side are you on in this story? Is it about love, protection, recovery, or something else? Honestly, I'm so excited for the next chapters. Thank you for creating such an interesting scenario.